Welcome! My name is Kelly Anderson, and this is Fanimated, the animation fan podcast where we get a chance to geek out about our favorite animated media. Brynn, Berryhill, and I are here to discuss the 1997 Studio Ghibli film Princess Mononoke. Another of Hayao Miyazaki's incredibly successful films, we can't wait to dive deep into the animation and story of this film. But first, a special thank you to our Patreon donors who voted for today's episode topic. If you'd like to vote for our upcoming episode topics, you can do so at patreon.com/fanimated. Just $1 a month helps supports the technical costs of the show while getting you some awesome rewards and behind-the-scenes bonus features. As always, spoiler warning for those who haven't seen the film, and let's get started and let's get animated.
Starting now. Hello, viewers, or not really viewers. Hello, listeners. This is the Fanimated podcast starring Kelly and Brynn, who is a little bit excited to be on the podcast today. Hi, Kelly. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Just a little silly, apparently.
Oh, that's great. That's exactly. Hey, you're making my job easier. I don't even have to introduce us. You can do it.
Or you can delete it out. I mean, either way works.
No way. I'm keeping that intro.
Most excellent.
Well, I'm doing well today. I'm also excited to talk about Princess Mononoke. How are you?
I'm well. I'm just fresh off of watching it for the first time in a bit, and it does not disappoint. I gotta tell you that.
It never disappoints. Absolutely not.
It's so beautiful and sad
Yes.
and relevant, you know?
Yes, and just beautiful. Just beautiful.
It's a masterpiece, and it deals with a lot of hard topics. Like I've been an elementary school teacher, and I've had people question me, like, thinking about showing Princess Mononoke to elementary school kids.
Yes.
Personally, I think that people don't give kids enough credit anymore.
Yeah.
It's like, yes, the dragon does eat children. Like, that's part of why it has the big sharp teeth.
Right.
But anyway, yeah, it's beautiful and hard.
Yeah, and you brought up an excellent point, actually. Just the fact of, should children be watching it? Obviously, I think that's totally up to every individual family to decide that. But Miyazaki himself was like, kids are going to understand the concepts of this film better than adults will. Because children have this innocence about them that they can just, like, pick up on those themes really well. Like, and me personally, like, I might not let, like, young children view this movie because it's pretty violent and there's blood and, like, you see several decapitations. So, like, a little wary on that. But I do think the themes are, true to anybody. So really kind of depends.
I still think that we need to give kids more credit because we live in a world where the news is constantly showing all these violent things, and we live in a world where news travels quickly, and yet we're trying to shelter our kids from the truth to the point of not talking about politics, to the point of not talking about, like, environmental changes and studies and global climate change and things like that. And the Grimm brothers, Hans Christian Andersen, Aesop, and the Grimm brothers were meant for kids, right?
Yeah.
Hansel and Gretel was a children's story, Anyway.
But it is, like, a fear-based, you make a good point that, like, these fairy tales were for kids, but I feel like it was a very fear-based tactic of, like, don't go into the woods alone, kind of moral teaching, which, maybe this is what Princess Mononoke is, too. But I also think that even adults, some people have more sensitivities towards certain things than others. And I think children are, definitely sensitive and aware of things. So if depending on the individual, blood and gore is going to keep you up at night, don't watch this movie.
Right. Right. And some people like horror films and some people don't, and I totally get that. I think that we need to give kids a little bit more credit than we do.
I would agree with that.
This movie is horrifying for adults for very, real reasons as well, though. The whole idea of land grabs and climate change and things like that, and, disrespecting the earth is huge, right? I almost feel like Greta, is it Thunberg? She is this, teenage girl who doesn't, so for anybody who doesn't know, she pretty much told her teachers and her parents, hey, I'm skipping school because it's more important to protest because global climate change than anything else. And her parents actually didn't back her. They're like, we don't support this. We're not going to stop you, but we don't support this. And so she single-handedly, created demonstrations in her school and in her town. And now she's gotten to the point where she's been speaking to summits and to world leaders and shaming them and saying, how dare you rob us of our future? And she goes around the world just to shame world leaders and saying, how dare you? And fighting for restoration of the earth and things like that. And I feel like she's almost like a modern day Princess Mononoke in a couple ways. She obviously doesn't have a knife or anything.
Right.
But I guess in that way, no, I'd still say that she's more Princess Mononoke than what's his bucket?
Ashitaka.
Ashitaka.
Yeah, because Greta has a lot of that, powerful rage inside of her that is more Princess Mononoke. Ashitaka is the calm presence.
He's the peacemaker.
He is. So for those of you who don't know, the basic story of Princess Mononoke is that Ashitaka is a young prince who protects his village from a demon, but in doing so gets cursed. His right arm is cursed, and it will kill him. So he leaves his village and heads west where the demon came from and tries to find out where it came from, and ends up in the middle of this war between the humans of Irontown, led by Lady Eboshi, and the spirits and gods of the forest. And Princess Mononoke, or San, her real name is San, but Princess Mononoke is the name of the movie because Mononoke means spirit or beast. So she's the princess of the beasts.
Well, they call her princess a couple times in the movie as well.
Right, because she's the princess of the beasts, but her name is San. And so it's this war between the two of them, two groups, and Ashitaka tries to, find the peace and balance through everything.
Right. And one of the most striking scenes is him going into Irontown for San to stop San and the ironworkers from killing each other.
Yes. Oh, the whole time he is a powerful warrior. He definitely defends himself and defends other people and, participates in violence, but he is also in this battle between these forces. He is a presence of stop the killing. He's just more killing will lead to more killing, and it's so fascinating to watch him interact with these two groups, and then you as the audience get to see these two groups and see both of their sides. And this is such a wonderful film because it's not completely black and white. What Lady Eboshi and the Irontown is doing is wrong. They're tearing apart the forest and ruining this nature, but they aren't completely bad either. Like Lady Eboshi
Yeah.
is truly like a hero among humans and is saving so many people who the rest of society has cast away. And obviously the spirits and gods of the forest like have this authority over the land, and it's like theirs, it's justly theirs, but like they're also, killing and attacking to protect it. So who's really in the right or wrong here?
I still firmly say that the humans are in the wrong. But I will say that Lady Eboshi is one of my favorite characters because she's so complex. Like,
Oh, yeah.
if it had been a guy who owned Irontown, or even a woman who owned Irontown, but more specifically, if it had been a guy who owned Irontown and just, like, he was money hungry or, like, power hungry, it would have been uninteresting and it would have been too much. But Lady Eboshi does everything right except for her disregard of the land. With the women, and like you were saying, she's doing so many good things. She is empowering these women to be these sassy, gun-wielding warriors, and she takes in the lepers of the community that everybody else left behind, and she is so full of love for her people, and wanting them to do well, and that is so beautiful. But also, lady, stop.
Right. I think I would agree. Yeah, she's definitely, and even Ashitaka knows that she's in the wrong when in regards to nature, but she truly believes she's doing what is right because she's there to protect these people. And I love that it's Lady Eboshi and San as these two figureheads, kind of, because they're both such strong, powerful women who are fighting for what they believe in, and it's just so powerful to watch two ladies, like being at the heads of this. Like, it's a very feminist film for 1997.
I still say that, like, when Ashitaka first said to, like, the forest and the beasts of the forest, can't we all just have peace? It feels a little bit like somebody going to the Native Americans and saying, can't we all have peace? Because the forest hasn't encroached on Irontown. Irontown is the one who has been trying to take land and take land and take land, and continued on their hunt of the forest. So I feel like it's no. And it's not until there's this bloodshed and utter horrific disaster that happens that the humans then go, oh, right. So about that peace that you were talking about, and it's sad, but it's true that something horrific had to happen for them to get the point.
Well, I agree that the humans are the one that encroached on their land, and we all know that is like the wrong, obviously, part of this. And Lady Eboshi, near the end, actually, severs the head of the spirit of the forest. Like, obviously, she's in the wrong there, right? But again, and I'm not, like, completely defending her, but I love her character because you are shown that she has a garden. She cares about nature. She, is taking all these people in and, like, is doing these things for a reason. And she attacks San and attacks the wolves to protect her people. So it's just so fascinating to have a character like this. Like, in Western culture, in Western films, if they're trying to make a point on, nature, there's going to be a very clear bad guy, like completely black and white, where industrialism is destroying everything and it's bad and we have to save it. But this just makes it so much more complex, this film does, and I love it because honestly, like, if you and I were in this film, it's like we'd love Lady Eboshi because she is the hero of humans.
She'd be my hero.
Absolutely. We'd all be like, thankful for Lady Eboshi. And and that's what I love about this film, is that it's so much more complex, and it makes you think, like, where, okay, well, let's reflect back on the real world. Like, where do I actually sit in this? And, like, how are we affecting the world around us? And ultimately, at the end of the movie, the humans win. It's like, well, maybe you can argue against it, because yes, the spirit of the forest, Ashitaka says, like, the spirit of the forest isn't dead. Like, it's life itself. Like, he's all around us. Like, and that's true. But also, like, the humans of Irontown are just going to rebuild, and they're going to keep doing what they were doing, and now they don't have these spirits and gods attacking them.
Well, I feel like when Eboshi was saying, like, get Ashitaka, I want to talk to him about, like, I feel like they're going to turn over a new leaf, and they're going to fix some of their ways, but it came at the expense of the death of the forest, and it came at the expense of the death of the spirits and the gods. And I think how I interpreted he's dead, well, he's not dead, is that, like, the dear god is dead, but but Ashitaka was saying, well, but you can still remember him in our hearts when you see life,
right,
in more of a general term, like when somebody passes away and you say they'll always be with you, sort of thing.
Right.
And so the humans learned their lesson at the expense of mass slaughter.
Yeah.
And I want to say genocide of a race of spirits.
It's true. That's what it was. Like, the boars are all dead.
Yep. And so this is a hard film. And I'm really glad to be able to do this podcast with you, because it's good to think about, and it's good to, like, it's such a good story.
It is. And the way you were describing it, too, makes me think, again, back on, like, old fairy tales, like Brothers Grimm and all those things. Like, maybe this really is a story that is warning its audience, like, this is what could happen. Like, the people of Irontown messed up, and this is what happened. So don't let that happen, and, don't kill the spirit of the forest.
I absolutely think that that's what Miyazaki was trying to do. Fast forward 20 years now. Fast forward 20 or so years, and we're getting warnings from scientists saying, like, hey guys, hey guys, so we should stop. So
right.
And which is why I'm saying it's so applicable to right now, and talking about Greta and everything. But I absolutely think so. But the way that he brings spirituality into it, and the way that he brings the spirit of the forest and the spirit of the land into it, is so gorgeous. It just speaks to my soul.
Absolutely. I agree. And I think this film will always be applicable, because that's the human story is man versus nature story, honestly. And there's always been something in our past that, it's always been a tug of war between, humans and the earth. And ultimately, I believe that there will be a new heaven and a new earth, but ultimately, like, nature is more powerful than humans.
Well, what's the quote? If a certain species of, like, insect or bird or bees were wiped off the planet, human beings would no longer be able to exist. But if human beings no longer existed, the world would still go on without us.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. I think we can forget that, because we like to think that we're oh so powerful, and obviously we are, and we're, like, changing the world by the things that we're doing in a not good way. But ultimately, like, it's not the earth we're gonna hurt, it's ourselves.
I mean, both and, but...
but like the Earth can recover.
Yep.
And we won't be able to.
Yep.
Anyway, doom and gloom.
But one thing that I loved about the deer god was that when we first meet the deer god, who's like known as the god of life, its hoof comes down and everything flourishes and then dies.
Yes.
And creates the complete circle of life and the complete cycle of life in that one footstep. And I thought that was gorgeous.
Yes, absolutely. It is. He's like a spirit of life and death. And I love that part too because the music cuts out and it's just silence. And as the spirit comes walking and you're like, oh my goodness. That's just like very intense and I love it.
I didn't notice that. Oh, that's such a good catch.
Yes, because the music in this film is phenomenal. It's one of the best film scores ever. And they just use sound so well. And then, of course, it just cuts out at that moment. And you're like, this is it. This is the spirit of the forest. Ooh, it gives me chills. So we've talked a lot about the man versus nature theme. There's another just as important theme that I was picking up on this time. And obviously it's like pretty obvious, but it, you get so enthralled with the man versus nature. Like that's like kind of the biggie, but it's also about like love versus hate because again, Ashitaka is like this force of like peace and this force of, his whole mantra is that he is there to see with eyes unclouded by hate. And even though San is fighting for what she believes is right and fighting for the forest and for nature, like she still has anger and hate in her heart. And Lady Eboshi does too. I love, like you were saying, going back to, you love the part where San comes into the village to kill Lady Eboshi and Ashitaka stops them. Also love that scene. So good. But that's like, he isn't trying to stop like there to being like he feels honestly he should be on San's side from the beginning because he has been like directly impacted by Lady Eboshi's actions. Like her actions killed the boar, caused the boar to turn into a demon, which caused the demon to curse Ashitaka. So it's Lady Eboshi's fault, but even he like refrains his arm from trying to kill her in the scene before because he is like, killing you won't do anything. Like he knows that, he's there to, battle that within himself and also within each other. So that's San, that he is like, San, you can't kill her. And this like tries to keep them from killing each other. It's just so fascinating and I love it. I just love this movie. I love that nothing is the way you think it should be. And all these characters make choices that are just not normal Western culture storytelling. And I love it.
My favorite part of that scene though is when he comes in and he like kind of like knocks the wind out of both of them, which point the first, he did have to use violence to stop violence, which is interesting. It just wasn't lethal violence.
Right.
Point the second, he throws them over his shoulder and like gives Lady Eboshi back to them. And then he's like, let me go. And they don't even know what to do with him at that point. They're just, they don't stop him because they don't understand what's going on. They haven't seen this kind of peacemaking or love before. Like you were talking about that theme of love. Like they haven't seen that before, or they don't comprehend like what is even going on right now. Like you have all of this power and you just stop them and now you want through, and they're trying to be like, no, we're going to stop you. And he's like, let me through. And they just let him. It was so beautiful to see an example of how love and peaceful, like peacemaking, can stop everybody in their tracks. The counterculture idea of stopping violence where it is and leaving it where it is so good.
It's so good. One of my absolute favorite parts in the entire film is when the spirit of the forest head has been decapitated. Ashitaka and San are on the little island, and San is so angry at him too, like, just angry about everything, and she loses it. Like, everything is at its lowest point, and she gets so angry and like tries to stab Ashitaka, and instead of like defending himself or anything, he just embraces her.
Yep.
And it's like the clearest picture of fighting anger with love, and it is so beautiful. I am gonna cry.
Yes. And I think that he does a really good job of representing love in this. Like, I thought it was so beautiful that, you know, this is a quote unquote princess story, right? The first kiss was her, like, chewing food and giving him food to sustain himself. And it wasn't a kiss, but, like, if you're looking at the princess lens or whatever, she, like, that was the kiss, quote unquote, but it wasn't done in a romantic way. It was done in a very raw and real way. And that was her showing love, not romantic love, but just, like, love in the sense of agape, in the sense of loving the whole person. And at the end of the movie, I didn't like it when I was little that they were going to live in separate places. But now that I'm, you know, older, I love that they both agree, like, I love you and I need to be with the people who need me right now. And I need to be where I belong. Right? And so...
Oh, it's so good.
The fact that they're having a long-distance relationship is like... I'm like, oh, honeys. But, like... It's
I think it will definitely work for them.
I think so, too. But it's such a beautiful ending of the movie.
It is.
The counter... And, like, I say countercultural a few different times, but, like, the countercultural idea of love that he sets forth on in this movie of, like, I love you and I need to be somewhere else. And loving someone even though they hurt you. Like, Ashitaka gets shot in the village because of a misfire, but he doesn't know that. He just keeps walking. And then he comes back to save the village and still works for their betterment. And, like, that is
exactly.
true.
He never really chooses a side. And they even say in the film, they're like, wait, whose side is he on? And it's not clear. He isn't on one of their sides. He's just on the side of life for both sides.
Yeah.
I also used to hate the ending.
Yep.
Because obviously you want them to, like, ride off into the sunset together. But I too really love it because, you know, neither of them are expected to change for the other person.
Yes.
They accept who they are. Ashitaka accepts who San is and what San has gone through, and that she cannot forgive the humans, and that she is such a big part of her isn't human, and
half of
is
her
going to stay with the forest.
Yeah.
And San knows that Ashitaka, you know, does feel that obligation or whatever duty to, like, help rebuild the town. And it's just, it really is such a, almost like Romeo and Juliet-esque, like...
I was thinking that a little bit. two different sides coming together, and but they don't have to change to end up together, you know? It's so beautiful. Realistically, without Ashitaka there in Irontown to guide them to a peaceful way of being, they would have fallen back into their ways very quickly.
Yes.
Like, really
That's
quickly.
true.
Like, give it a year, and they're just going to fall right back to where they were. But if the foundations of the new Irontown are created with Ashitaka's help, that could make a difference.
Yes. Absolutely. And it's not like Ashitaka has to be in the village forever. It's just that, yeah, he's going to help rebuild these foundations. I like that.
And I would even be comfortable with them and their relationship being meeting on the edges of the forest and meeting within the forest. Like, it's humble, and
it is.
It's simple, and it's not like super passionate like we're used to seeing in the media, all these tales of romance and passion and blah blah blah. It's
and then
simple.
At the end they get married.
right, and in a passionate, kiss that sparked the fireworks of 1,000 flames and that set firebenders to shame, blah blah blah. Like, it's just so simple and raw and beautiful, and I'm okay with that now.
Me too.
That I'm older.
Yes, now.
And I've been
now that I appreciate it.
Well, and the thing is, I've been exposed to different kinds of romance now. Whereas when we're kids, we see, especially you and I, grew up with the very princess model of fairy tales and the very romance novel model of what a romantic comedy or a romantic relationship is supposed to look like. But not all relationships look that way. And I think it's really good to have representation of that.
Another thing about the ending, so Neil Gaiman wrote the English version of the script, and which is an interesting tidbit and very, very fascinating.
Neil Gaiman is my favorite writer, so...
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Okay, so... So, like, he was basically given a word-for-word translation, and then he, writes it to make sense for a Western audience. Mm-hmm. And he said he was, he would point out the difference in the ending of this film because it isn't like what most Western audiences expect. Like, if this film was a Western film, San and Ashitaka would come riding into Irontown and everyone would throw a big party for them. Like, it would, they'd get like Star Wars Medal of Honor at the end,
right.
at the end of the movie, and they'd end with a kiss, like we said, or something. This whole film is very not Western, and I love it. Let's talk about Miyazaki for a little bit and Studio Ghibli and where this film sits in all of this story. This film is what I think truly launched, especially internationally, the popularity of Miyazaki's films and Studio Ghibli as a whole. Because before this, obviously, he had some really phenomenal films, but this is the one that was like their big investment, financial investment, and it was a big financial boom for them too. And I mean, I feel like when I talk to people, this is quite often their favorite Studio Ghibli film. The Princess Mononoke launched a succession of very popular and very artistically taxing films for Miyazaki. After this, you get Spirited Away and then Howl's Moving Castle. Like, these three, boom, boom, boom. It's like peak Miyazaki's career right there.
Right. Actually,
and this was like the start of that.
Was it after those three that he threatened to retire for the first time, or?
Yes, because he's retired several times. Retired, quote unquote.
Just keeps coming back.
Yeah, I don't know when the first time was that he
JK,
did.
guys.
Just kidding, I can't stop. Well, the thing is, and this film is no exception, Miyazaki is famous for putting so much of himself into his work. He will sit down and reanimate things, or sit down and draw, and he gets down and dirty into it. He is not a director who can who I don't think he physically can stay away from the details. Like, he is in it. And that is why, obviously, it's like, it takes such a toll on him. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad he retires and can have some peace. But yeah, he can't just sit on the sidelines while something is being worked on.
Gets fidgety.
And I love that about him. And you can tell that it's true in all of his films because they're all so, so beautifully done. And he put so much of his heart and soul into them.
Mm-hmm.
Princess Mononoke is also kind of his first that he could really stretch his storytelling skills and be, didn't have to be super, not shallow, because I don't think any of his films are shallow, but he could really go in depth with the themes, and he could really stretch. I mean, even the length, obviously, it's a long film.
Yeah. Well, not by today's standards, but by yesterday's standards, yes.
Yes.
And I'm looking at it now.
Exactly.
It is PG-13. So it's not intended for kids.
Oh, it is PG-13. Okay.
I still think that the right kind of 6-year-old can handle this, but that's beside the point.
Yep. Again, up to each and every family and individual.
Right. I don't know about as much about Ghibli and Miyazaki as I should.
That's okay. I pretend that I know, but I don't really. In all honesty, I've been a Studio Ghibli fan for not very many years, so there's still stuff that I'm learning.
Right. I think we talked about this before. I had said, like, I had seen Howl's Moving Castle sometime in yesteryear, like, back in my childhood, but really Ghibli hit me with, like, in my college years when I could binge. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't until, like, college years that I actually found him and found his films. So, same here.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of people, their whole childhood was My Neighbor Totoro. And that's just like, it's like SpongeBob for them. And I can't wait. If I have kids, I definitely want to raise them on Ghibli, and I want to raise them on Miyazaki, so that, like, Totoro is kind of their childhood Barney instead of Barney. Cause no. But yeah, you know what I mean?
Yes, and My Neighbor Totoro is a good point to it actually ties in with this film specifically, because Miyazaki wrote several versions of this film, and he had this idea for a very long time. He actually used a lot of concepts, like original concepts for this film, in My Neighbor Totoro. And so he had to redo a lot of his story going into actually creating this film, because there were some concepts he couldn't use anymore because he had already used them.
I mean, it makes sense.
But yeah, it does, and I love it. I mean, you can see there's even there's even a comic book or something that he did that it's very clearly Yaku, the red elk, is in that.
Aww.
Like, he, I think artists, take a lot of ideas from different places and, like, rework them or mesh them together and, take ideas from other projects.
And if you have the ability to create creatures like Yaku or, like, the little Kodamas, and you can make those sorts of things, they become precious to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I haven't been able to do character design like that yet, but I'm really excited for the day that I can, because making something as adorable as the Kodamas and being able to call it mine, I'd put it in, like, all of my films as one of those, like, secret, like, the through line of all of my films.
Yes.
These adorable little creatures.
So obviously, Princess Mononoke was very popular. It was the highest grossing film in Japan of 1997. And it stayed, like, the highest grossing film in Japan until Spirited Away. And now it's number 7, I think. And Your Name is at the top of the list now.
Because it's amazing.
Phenomenal. Another interesting tidbit about the English dub, there are added, and I watched the one with the subtitles as well, because I usually watch things in dub because I like to be able to focus on the visuals instead of having to read everything on the subtitles. But I could tell, and it's true, that like, well, there's additional voiceover like narration during some bits for the Western English dub because they're explaining nuances about Japanese culture that Western audiences wouldn't pick up on.
Yeah.
As well as sometimes there's just entire sections that are given English dialogue that there is no dialogue during the original Japanese version.
Because like, silence is they're probably more used to silence in Japan too.
Yeah, and I wonder why, because one was even just at the very beginning when Ashitaka is fighting the demon, his sister falls down and he's like, and then he goes and shoots the demon. Well, in the English, he actually yells like, Kaya, and like something, I don't know. And in the original Japanese, it's like there is no talking through that scene. They're not yelling at each other at all. Like, in the English dub, both Ashitaka and like Kaya and Kaya's friend are like saying stuff like, while this big action scene is going on, and you can't really tell because, of course, they are moving so fast. So
right.
I never even thought about it watching the English dub, that it would be misplaced, because it's not. It feels normal. And then I watched the Japanese and I was like, wait, why is no one talking? So that was interesting.
Interesting. I would have never caught on to that.
In production, so this film is traditionally animated, 2D animation, but it also uses some 3D rendering, and that would be composited onto the traditional animation. So in total, there's about 5 minutes of film in the 2+ hour movie that has computer animation, and part of it was used for like the boars when they become demons, that like slimy, wriggly flesh that comes out of them. And so that would be put onto that traditional animation, which it's beautiful. Honestly, the beginning film, this film just starts off with a bang, because that fight scene between Ashitaka and the demon is beautiful, and I love, regardless of the 3D rendering that's used, which is awesome, and just like milled so well with their 2D animation. I just love the 2D animation in general. I could watch that red elk jump around the screen for 2 hours just because like it's so good, and all of the camera angles, and it's just like boarded really well, and it feels so natural, and just the way that they move, it's so good. That scene. Honestly, just watch that first scene. If you don't want to watch the rest of the film after watching that first scene, then I don't know what to tell you. I'm gonna put the first scene on the Patreon page.
Do it.
www.patreon.com/Fanimated. I'll put that up. Anyone can go watch it, but go there right now, sit and watch that like 3-minute scene of Ashitaka being amazing.
Yes. I was wondering if if some of the, like, I'm pretty sure they're called kodamas, because kendama is the toy, but kodama is the little rattly shaky dude.
Yeah.
So I wondered if the kodamas had some computer animation to it, because they had their opacity faded in and out, and I was wondering if that was computer animated or not, because that's something that I've easily been able to control in like Photoshop or in Lightroom or Illustrator, but that's really hard in hand animation or hand drawing.
Right. That would be a fun thing to check. I will say that even if you look at old films like Pinocchio, the fairy witch lady has the same sort of opacity / glowy feel thing going on. So it can be done traditional, but I don't. That's a great question for whether or not this film in particular, what they used for those little tree spirits. I don't have an answer for that. So if someone else does, email us at fanimatedpodcast@gmail.com.
Yay!
So because this is traditionally animated and done traditionally, all of the cells of the film are hand painted and it's beautiful.
Jesus.
Not all. Okay, I lied. I already lied. Not all of them. I know they did some computers for that because they needed to just get it done on time, because that's how. I mean, they boarded some of these scenes like 4 months before it was supposed to premiere. So, but they had to get things done. The
fact that they're still that studio is still hand doing things is amazing.
Oh, it's beautiful, and partially why I love them. But there are 144,000 cells in this film, and there's a rumor that Miyazaki has denied, but the rumor is that he helped redraw 80,000 cells, and that's a little much, but also even if it's a little bit exaggerated, I wouldn't be surprised if he did that,
Right. Because he's Miyazaki.
Oh, goodness.
Having that hand-done thing, aesthetic and quality, when you have computer animation everywhere and nobody's hand animating anything anymore or doing their own backdrops anymore or things like that, it really is something special.
I would agree. And I would also add, though, that computers, it is different. A computer animated film versus a traditionally animated film versus a stop motion animation film are all different mediums, and they have their own artistic beauty about them. Absolutely. And their own artistic mastery of, and I think that every artist in whatever medium, in whatever, department of that medium is doing something special and beautiful. And if anything, computers just allow more things to be available. I love a traditionally animated film, and I'm really excited for Klaus, for example, because they're taking traditional animation into the 21st century a little more, which is super cool. And I want more traditionally animated films because they are beautiful, and we don't want them to die out.
Right.
But also computer animation can do so many different things, and obviously we want to utilize that tool.
I think it depends on how you use it. So for example, CGI. Within the craze of CGI, we have lost practical effects almost entirely.
Yeah.
Let's look at Lion King or Cats. I think that our society not our society, sorry, Hollywood has hit a peak where they're look at all the pretty things that we can do. And now people are kind of rolling their eyes and going, okay, but where are our practical effects? You could have done this with some makeup. And you could have hired makeup artists to do half of this and then done a nice blend of practical and CGI. And
right.
I think that there's a... It depends on what you're doing with it. Because, if you're doing something... Cats could have been done with practical effects. So they're kind of needlessly doing that with CGI. But, Pixar is completely computer animated, but you can only make Toy Story 4 in computer animated studio. You know what I mean?
Right. Yes.
I don't think that I think that some shows are just being produced with computer animation in a sloppy and quick sort of way because they can. And they're not putting as much artistry into it or taking advantage of it. But for the people who are doing it right, they're really doing it right. And the people who are combining the two, they find a happy balance. But it's very rare that you find people are doing like more hand animation than computer animation, and I really appreciate that artistry as well. But does that make sense?
Yeah. The big fear is that we lose that medium, that artistry of 2D animation, just like we feel like we're losing those traditional effects that, you know, the original Star Wars had, you know?
Right.
And that's what, you know, some of the new Star Wars, like they're bringing back some of that, or I see that in some other films too. But yeah, making these effects happen in the shot, not in post-production, which is an art in and of itself and is something that needs to be preserved. And that's where we're at with 2D animation as well. It's something that we still need to use and create, because those are things that create magic, unlike a computer, because it does make the audience wonder, how did they do that?
Right.
You know? And that is something we don't want to lose.
And if you're going to use a computer, use it for a good reason, you know? And don't rely on it for something that you could have done 2D. I feel like, I don't know, maybe I'm overstepping and maybe I'm overgeneralizing, but again, the idea of like, if you're going to use it well and use it to its full extent. Use it because that's what you need to use to do it. Not because it's the cheapest, quickest, dirtiest way to do it.
Oh, I was just going to do like a thank you to Patreon supporters.
Hey, Patreon! Thank you so much! And stuff. I love this podcast, and I'm glad that you're helping to love this podcast as well, because it's awesome.
Yes! Woo. Thank you for voting on this episode topic, and if you want to vote for upcoming episode topics, go to patreon.com/Fanimated. $1 a month will let you vote on our monthly polls, and coming up in December, we have a whole bunch of Christmas animated films that we're voting on, so check it out.
Ooh, yes. That sounds like fun. Cheesy, wonderful fun.
That's what we're here for. Well, before we wrap up, I really need to talk about Ashitaka just a little bit more.
Please do. Our sweet little lamb.
Because I am here to make the bold statement that Ashitaka is the best Studio Ghibli guy. And I love Howl as much as the next girl, but I'm sorry, Ashitaka has it all.
Oh, Howl is super womanizer. No, he's not the best. I'm trying to think of the other Studio Ghibli guys now. Well, who else do we have in Studio Ghibli?
Well, isn't that a good question? Because most of the protagonists are female, and I love it.
Yeah, that's fair. We don't have much to go on. That's so good.
Well, even Nausicaa, the Valley of the Wind, has that like guy that she hangs out with. It's always the guy that just hangs out with the girl. It's not the girl that just hangs out with the guy. Because even I'm thinking about Kiki's Delivery Service. There's that guy that's always following her.
Yeah. He doesn't have much of a super strong personality.
No.
Who's the kid? What's the story where they're like spiffing up their clubhouse?
Oh, from Up on Poppy Hill.
Yeah. Up on Poppy Hill.
Okay, that's actually... That honestly, from Up on Poppy Hill, just might be my favorite Studio Ghibli film of all time ever.
So good. It's so good.
And it's beautiful. And it's
so
the
sweet.
most precious story.
I don't think he has as much of a personality as Ashitaka does.
No! As much as I love that movie, Ashitaka is the best. Sorry.
I love that Miyazaki's men don't have personalities. His leading men don't have personalities, and I think it's hilarious.
Except for Howl. Howl makes up for the lack of personality in everyone else.
That's fair. Howl, and then Ashitaka's
he's an over-dramatic.
Yep. He sucked up all
Drama
of the
queen.
drama from all of the other male leads. That and Ashitaka's got his, like, love spin and his, like, peacemaker spin, but he puts his foot down for it, which makes him interesting. Yeah. Oh my gosh, you're right.
Because Ashitaka, not only is he cute, because Howl's cute too, but Howl is self-centered. And Ashitaka is like the truly perfect guy. Like
Would you say he's the complete opposite of Howl?
Yes, in almost every single way.
I don't know what way he isn't the opposite of Howl.
Yeah, because
I don't
they're
think there's-
very complete opposites.
I think they are complete 100% black and white opposites. Besides that, they're both
Even
light-skinned.
their story is opposite. Because I feel like, to be honest, I don't think Ashitaka actually has much character development. This isn't a story about him. I mean, it's about him. It's following him. But honestly, the character development is in the people around him.
Yes. Oh my gosh, he's the lens.
He is just the lens through which we're seeing this, and he is and the audience too. Like, this film, another thing I love about it is that it's not always looking for Ashitaka's reaction or Akitasha's thoughts about something. It's about the audience's thoughts. Like, they leave it up to you. I love it.
Yeah, and there's so much up for interpretation. Like, you and I come away with different main themes, I feel like, or different spins on it, which is because we see it differently, and it's up to the audience to be able to glean from the movie, except that humans are innocent, because it's not true.
That's not what this movie is trying to tell you. That is not it. I think you got it wrong.
From this movie, you need to either go back and watch it, or we need to have a tough conversation, buddy.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, and at the end, when the samurai are trying to take over Iron Town, and some of the samurai like chase after Ashitaka literally catches one of their arrows in the air and fires it back on them and kills them. Like, I'm sorry, Ashitaka's the best.
I thought, oh, that's another thought. Okay, so Ashitaka was infected by the demonic energy or whatever, right?
Right.
Every time that he used his arm, it created more violence, meaning that hate and violence is a sickness.
Yes.
Yes. That amplifies whatever you are doing, even if you mean to be doing, like, less. Because he didn't mean to completely decapitate several people with an arrow, but it happened because that hate and violence that he was infected with amped it up. I thought that was so interesting, and he was fighting against his hatred. And if you think of it as a personification of his hatred for humanity and his hatred for the people who did this, he was fighting his hatred of Lady Eboshi all for the entire time, and his hatred of the people who had done this to him and done this to the forest the entire time, and he was fighting it in order to become the peacemaker.
And he was, because there are times where you can tell that he wants to lash out, but he doesn't. He restrains himself.
Mm-hmm.
Miyazaki has said something about how Ashitaka has these evil powers because this arm also gives him like incredible strength and all this other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But he uses it for good purposes.
Or he tries.
He tries because, and I think he does. Even though, yes, he's like killing people, but he's trying to use it for good, and that's like this duality of, you know, the good and evil inside all of us.
Yeah, and again, when it comes to times of violence and when it comes to times of war, I feel like it's hard because Ashitaka did have to become violent with them. And he did have to, like, put arrows in people in order to keep order and in order to live and in order to continue to fight for peace. I think that's a really hard concept to sit with because he is such a pacifist, but he still had to kill people. Like, right. That's a really hard thing to sit with.
It is. This whole film is so good. It just makes you think about things, guys. Ugh,
it's so good. We didn't even talk about Jikobo or whatever. The guy that he saved that ended up being like the god killer, like the god hunter. Isn't that just the way though? Isn't it just the way?
It's really like, man, just men are going to be dumb and do, like, I say men as in mankind in general. Like, mankind, humans are always going to be trying to do things they shouldn't.
Okay, but also the Irontown women were, like, my favorite characters. So, also, though. No, but I agree. I think that this is a much needed movie, and I hope that more people watch it.
And despite everything, Miyazaki like talks about how he really wants people to know, like, this film is like, despite the carnage of war, like, life is still worth living and beautiful things exist, and we need to fight for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Well, we've said just about all we have to say about Princess Mononoke. So, Brynn, what have you been watching recently besides Princess Mononoke?
Well, I've been watching Dr. Stone upon the request of my middle school students. And I'm like 6 or 7 episodes in, but it's an interesting show. Give it a go.
Yeah.
Give it a whirl. I've also been getting through Tangled and watching She-Ra a lot. I'm finding it really hard because my friends and I have a Saturday morning cartoon meeting, and I've been trying to wait for them to continue She-Ra. So I've been watching the first and second seasons of She-Ra like 3 times while I'm doing my knitting projects and grading papers.
Yes.
So I'm really, I might be weak and watch that sometime soon. What have you been watching?
I also have been watching Tangled the series because it's beautiful and perfect, and I can't wait for you to get to the most recent episodes, Brynn, because wow.
Soon.
Varian, I don't think this is an understatement to say Varian is my favorite character.
Oh, I've never heard you say that before, Kelly. Tell me more.
Whenever there's an episode about Varian, my heart dies. Okay, Ooh. Varian is my adoptive son, and I love him. He's my precious baby child. And I just want the best for him, and I love him. Anyway, I don't want to talk about it too much because I talked about it in the last episode too of Fanimated. But
Kelly,
what?
Have you been watching Miraculous?
Oh my god. Oh, it's so good and so bad at the same time.
I'm so mad at them so much. Are we gonna do an episode about it like once it's all over, or are we gonna like
I
wait for the reveal at some point if it ever comes?
It's such a roller coaster that like I'd rather wait until it's over, but I don't know if it will ever be over.
I don't know if they're gonna let it die.
Like Miraculous Ladybug has gotten so popular internationally, and like there's a movie coming out. Like this thing, I mean, they're just trying to drag it on as long as they can.
Is the live action one gonna actually happen, or is it just gonna be animated?
I don't know if it's live action or if it's animated, but there's a movie coming out. I know that.
I am also convinced that if you were to take all of our rantings about Ladybug from each of the episodes, you would have an episode for Ladybug.
Yeah. Those listening, you might not know this because I probably cut most of this, but Brynn and I just talked about Ladybug and Chat Noir for like 10 minutes. And we could probably make a whole
episode,
Miraculous Ladybug episode just off of our rantings. So be on the lookout, or check right now, because maybe you're listening to this in the future and we have already done an episode on the Miraculous Ladybug show. Yeah, check our episode out on that.
But it's usually every time that we do an episode that we have
We're always talking about it because it's the constant like force in our lives. It brings us closer together.
It does. It truly does.
Well, on that note,
Kelly,
what?
At con, we could dress up as Ladybug and Chat Noir.
Yes, I am Chat Noir.
I am Ladybug, and this is gonna be great.
My hair is short now, so it even works.
Perfect.
I don't even have to be like a super femme Chat Noir.
Oh, that'd be awesome. And then my hair will be long enough to put in pigtails by then too.
Oh my gosh, we're doing it.
It's
happening. Come see us at cons.
Anyways, you were trying to outro, and I interrupted you. Well, thank you so much for having me on, Kelly.
Always, Brynn. Thank you so much for coming on, talking about Princess Mononoke, and I can't wait to talk to you about more animation stuff soon.
Yes. All right, have a good night. Bye, guys.
Thanks so much for joining us today. Brynn and I loved discussing Princess Mononoke. Let us know your thoughts on Facebook and Instagram at Fanimated Podcast. You can also email us at fanimatedpodcast@gmail.com. A special thank you to all of our Patreon donors who voted for this week's episode. You can vote for upcoming episode topics at patreon.com/fanimated. The art for this podcast is done by me. You can find me on Instagram at CandorDraw. The music is provided by Purple Planet Music, and a huge thank you to Brynn for joining me today. We will talk to you in a couple weeks, and in the meantime, stay tuned and stay animated.
The end like 5 seconds of the Kodama coming up and being the sign that life is coming back to the forest and that it's going to be healthy again was the most satisfying ending to any movie that I've ever seen ever. That was my last note.